because standing still makes you a target for pickpockets and beggars. The pie is hot enough to burn your tongue, filled with meat that might be mutton or might be something else entirely. Medieval food laws are more suggestions than requirements, and vendors use whatever protein they can acquire cheaply. You don't ask questions. The meat is cooked, it's seasoned with herbs that mask any questionable flavors, and it fills the hollow ache in your stomach. Around you, the morning market comes alive with dozens of other food vendors. A woman sells fresh bread from a basket balanced on her head, calling out in French accented English that marks her as a recent immigrant from Normandy. Her bread is coarse, dark, heavy with the kind of grain that fills you up, rather than pleasing your palate. But it's fresh, and she breaks off pieces to let customers taste before buying. An alewife has set up her stall near the church steps, serving weak beer from wooden barrels that she carries from house to house. The beer is safer than water, everyone knows that. It's also more nourishing than water, containing enough grain and herbs to qualify as liquid food. She serves it in wooden bowls that customers return after drinking, creating a system of communal vessels that spreads disease as effectively as it serves nutrition. You watch a group of apprentices sharing a bowl of pottage, a thick stew of vegetables and grains that represents the most basic form of street food in medieval England. It's cheap, filling, and requires only one pot and one fire to prepare in large quantities. The vendor ladles it from a cauldron that has been simmering since before dawn, adding water and ingredients throughout the day as needed. The apprentices eat with wooden spoons that they've brought themselves, or with pieces of bread that serve as both utensil and additional food. They don't sit while eating. Sitting requires chairs or benches, and those cost extra money that working people rarely have. Instead, they stand in a loose circle, sharing information about their masters, complaining about working conditions, negotiating small trades and favors. This is how medieval people socialize. Around shared food purchased from strangers, eaten standing up in the middle of streets that serve as combination marketplace, workshop, and social center. Privacy is for the wealthy. Community happens in public, around vendors who provide not just sustenance, but gathering places for people who live in spaces too small and crowded for entertaining. As the day progresses, the food offerings change to match the rhythm of medieval labor. Mid-morning brings vendors selling small beer and cheese to workers who need something to sustain them until the main meal of the day. Afternoon sees the appearance of fruit sellers offering apples and pears to people with a few extra pennies for something sweet. But the constant is hunger, and the constant response is these vendors with their carts and baskets and cauldrons, providing ready-made solutions to the problem of feeding people who work too hard for too many hours in conditions too difficult to allow for domestic cooking. They're not creating cuisine, they're solving the fundamental challenge of urban life one meal at a time. The church bells ring the canonical hours, marking the passage of time in a world without clocks. But the real rhythm of the day is set by these vendors, by the cycles of cooking and selling that ensure the city's population doesn't starve in the narrow spaces between their crowded tenements and their exhausting labor. You don't understand the language being spoken around you in this Tang Dynasty marketplace, but you understand hunger, and the smells that rise from the vendor stalls speak a universal tongue. Chang'an in the year 750 CE is the largest city in the world, home to over 1 million people drawn from every corner of the known world by the promise of trade, scholarship, and opportunity in the most cosmopolitan empire ever assembled. The morning air in the East Market District carries the aroma of star anise and Sichuan peppercorns, scents that make your mouth water even as they remind you how far you are from anything familiar. As a Sogdian trader, you've traveled the Silk Road for months to reach this city, and now you stand bewildered among food vendors whose offerings seem more like alchemy than cooking. A noodle vendor works behind his cart with movements so practiced they seem like meditation. His hands stretch and fold the dough in rhythmic motions, creating thin strands that he drops into boiling water with the precise timing of a master craftsman. The steam rises around his face, carrying the scent of ginger and scallions that he adds to each bowl before ladling in the hot broth. You watch him serve a Buddhist monk whose orange robes mark him as a visitor from India, a Persian merchant whose beard is henna'd red in the style of his homeland, and a group of Korean scholars whose top knots and flowing robes indicate their status as educated men. Each receives the same noodles, but the vendor adjusts the seasoning slightly, less salt for the monk's dietary restrictions, extra spice for the Persian, who gestures for more heat. The noodles are served in pottery bowls glazed blue and white, more beautiful than anything you'd eat from in your distant hometown. But beauty here is casual, almost accidental. The vendor treats these bowls as tools, rinsing them quickly in a basin of hot water before refilling them for the next customer. Artistry serves function in this city where even street food aspires to elegance. Nearby, a dumpling vendor operates from a wheeled cart, equipped with multiple levels of bamboo steamers. The dumplings inside are works of edible engineering, thin wrappers folded into precise pleats that hold fillings of pork and cabbage, or mushrooms and tofu for the vegetarian customers. She works with the speed of someone who has folded 10,000 dumplings, her fingers moving without conscious thought as she shapes each one into perfect uniformity. You buy 6 dumplings and eat them standing beside her cart, burning your tongue on the filling that's somehow both scalding hot and perfectly seasoned. The wrapper dissolves in your mouth with a texture unlike anything you've experienced. Neither bread nor pastry, but something uniquely Chinese that speaks to centuries of culinary refinement applied to the humble goal of feeding working people. The variety around you is overwhelming. Vendors sell skewered meat roasted over charcoal braziers, the lamb and beef seasoned with cumin and chili that reflect the Persian and Central Asian influences flowing along the trade routes. Others offer rice porridge from large earthenware pots, ladling the creamy mixture into bowls and topping it with preserved vegetables, dried meat, or sweet red beans, depending on the customer's preference and budget. A fruit vendor displays melons and peaches arranged with the same aesthetic care that wealthy families apply to formal dining. But these aren't decorations, they're merchandise for people who want a moment of sweetness in their daily labor. She cuts the fruit to order with a small, sharp knife, serving it on leaves that substitute for plates, while adding their own subtle fragrance to the experience. You notice that eating here is more ritualized than in the Western cities you know. People bow slightly to vendors before ordering. They eat more slowly, more deliberately, even when standing in the middle of a busy marketplace. The food itself seems designed to encourage mindfulness. The dumplings require careful attention to avoid burning yourself. The noodles must be lifted skillfully with chopsticks. The tea that accompanies every meal demands appreciation of subtle flavors. This isn't just sustenance, it's culture made edible, philosophy expressed through the medium of street food. The vendors aren't just feeding people, they're maintaining traditions that connect this cosmopolitan capital to villages and provinces throughout the empire, creating continuity in a world of constant change and movement. As the day progresses, you see how the food offerings shift to accommodate different needs and budgets. Morning brings simple rice porridge for laborers beginning their shifts. Midday sees more elaborate dishes for merchants and officials who can afford longer lunch breaks. Evening brings street-side banquets where groups share multiple dishes, turning public eating into communal celebration. But through it all, the fundamental truth remains. This great city feeds itself through these countless individual transactions between vendors and customers, each exchange building the economic and social fabric that holds together the largest, most sophisticated empire the world has yet seen. The flavors you taste here will travel with you along the Silk Road, carried in memory and imitation back to distant cities where cooks will attempt to recreate the magic they've heard described by travelers. Street food, you realize, is how culture spreads. One meal at a time, one satisfied customer at a time, one story at a time. You stand in the great marketplace of Tenochtitlan in the year 1500, and nothing in your European experience has prepared you for what you're witnessing. The Aztec capital holds over 200,000 people, making it larger than any city in Europe, and its central market feeds this population with a sophistication that makes your hometown food vendors seem like primitive children playing at commerce. The scale overwhelms you first. Vendors stretch as far as you can see in every direction, organized by product and regulated by officials who move through the crowds with the authority of imperial administrators. This isn't the chaotic assemblage of individual entrepreneurs you know from European markets. This is food distribution as state policy, street vending elevated to the level of civic infrastructure. The smells assault your senses with unfamiliar intensity. Chili peppers being ground on stone metates release vapors that make your eyes water and your nose run. Cacao beans roast over charcoal fires, producing an aroma that's simultaneously earthy and rich, nothing like the processed chocolate that wealthy Europeans import at enormous expense. Corn tortillas cook on clay griddles, creating the foundation scent that underlies everything else, nutty, warm, fundamental as bread, but completely different from anything in your grain-based experience. A vendor demonstrates the preparation of tamales, working with ingredients you can't identify. She spreads corn mesa on corn husks with practiced movements, adding fillings that might be meat, might be vegetables, might be combinations you've never imagined. The husks are folded into neat packets and dropped into large clay pots filled with steaming water. The entire process seems like magic. Food cooked inside its own wrapper, seasoned with spices that exist nowhere in the European pharmacopoeia. You watch her serve a customer, a feather worker whose elaborate clothing marks him as skilled artisan, and notice the transaction involves not metal coins, but cacao beans counted out with careful precision. The economic system itself is foreign to you. Value is measured in consumable currency that can be eaten if necessary, creating a fluidity between money and food that eliminates the abstraction of European monetary systems. The variety of available foods expands your understanding of what human beings can eat. Vendors sell insect larvae harvested from lake beds, prepared with salt and chili until they resemble tiny, crunchy nuts. Others offer salamanders and frogs from the lake system that surrounds the city, grilled whole and seasoned with herbs that grow nowhere in Europe. Your European prejudices tell you this is primitive, but your empty stomach and the obvious sophistication of the preparation suggest otherwise. A beverage vendor serves drinks that challenge every assumption you have about what constitutes food. Chocolate mixed with chili peppers creates a combination of flavors that shouldn't work, but somehow harmonizes into something greater than its components. Pulque, fermented agave juice, provides alcoholic content with a sourness unlike European beer or wine. These aren't primitive attempts to imitate familiar foods. They're entirely different approaches to nutrition and pleasure. The organization of the market reveals social complexities you're only beginning to understand. Vendors selling simple corn-based foods occupy one section, while those offering meat and elaborate preparations command premium locations. Cacao vendors operate under special regulations, their precious beans serving simultaneously as seasoning, beverage base, and currency. The entire system demonstrates planning and administration that rivals anything in European cities. You notice that eating here involves different social protocols than European street food. Customers often share purchases, breaking large tortillas or tamales into portions for family groups. Vendors provide water for